So it's your office spends about $10 million a year. How much more would it cost to expand its overview to all these other areas, the mush areas?
It wouldn't be a very high amount. I mean, our budget's $9.6 million to oversee about 400 different government bodies. So, I mean, it's a drop in the bucket. One other area that I wanted to talk about is the Special Investigations Unit. We've been asked many times about the status of our SIU investigation. The SIU reported back on March 31st on progress it has done implementing our investigations. And quite frankly, the impression I get from the SIU is that they've eaten their dessert before their main course. They've latched on the easy recommendations, such as establishing a policy to discourage independent investigators from walking around wearing police badges and insignias. You'll recall from our report that we had discovered that independent SIU investigators were walking around with police paraphernalia. So they've adopted the no-brainers, the obvious ones, but they have not adopted yet the hardcore recommendations. And one of them is that witness officers should be interviewed immediately. And as a result of that, we've informed the SIU on June 2nd that we would be conducting a further investigation to find out what's happened to the recommendations. If you look at any investigation, any qualified investigator will tell you that the best evidence is your freshest evidence. Look at the biggest black eye given to the RCMP as a result of the Dzansky report, the Dzansky case. Apart from the actual discharging of the taser, it was the suggestion that officers had colluded in preparing their notes and before giving statements to the investigative authorities. I don't know why in Ontario we want to keep that door open, why we want to allow for the collusion between officers before a statement is given, or the suggestion that they're colluding. And many of the investigations we've done, such as MPAC or the OLG, we see that the organization has to hit the bottom before it can turn around. And in my view, the SIU hasn't hit the bottom yet, and we're not satisfied with the response that we've received to our investigation.
Is the problem with the SIU or with the police?
Well, the SIU, right now the legislation allows the SIU to get the statements immediately, but they have to request it, and they're refusing to make that, to commit to making that request. They're saying we leave it to the discretion of the SIU investigator. And that's what got us in trouble to begin with. I don't think it's a question of discretion. The police unions continually say that they have lawyers on the scene before the SIU even appear. So what's the problem then with getting SIU investigators to ask witness officers, not subject officers, but pure witness officers who are under duty to cooperate for immediate statements?
What's your theory as to why they're not doing SIU experiments?
Well, I would think that the SIU is always in a difficult position, is always under a lot of pressure by police groups to bend the rules. And, my job is to remind them to apply the rules. And it's one case where we can't afford not to apply them.
So, sorry, would you be launching your stand-up? Would it be a new investigation or just sort of a review of their response sort of thing?
A review of the response, and I'm very curious to hear what is the justification for not interviewing witness officers immediately or at least within 24 hours? What is the theory? Because it would be certainly news to me to hear that that is good practice. And another area that gives me concern, we talk about in the report about the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities. And we have two outstanding investigations in this area, which I'll be reporting on very soon within the next month. One is called the Best Tech Investigation. The other one is called Cabrian. There are pages 36 and 37 in the report. One involves an investigation into allegations that students were obtaining a phony degree, going to a college, obtaining a degree which was not what was promised and couldn't enter the labor force with that degree. And the other one is that the institution itself was fictitious, illegally operating college. And we'll be reporting shortly on those cases, but this is an area which has recently received an infusion of $1 billion in post-secondary funding from the federal government. So it's an area that's flush with money, and the Ministry of Training, Colleges, Universities should take their obligation seriously to ensure that colleges which are operating illegally are dealt with expeditiously, and those who are offering degrees which are not worth the paper they're written on are also dealt with. Because I can tell you from my spider sense that I am very concerned that in view of the large amounts of money that's coming into the system right now, that there will be abuses in this sector.
What's the evidence there that the ministry ignored the fact that there were, or ignored the signs that this was institution was operating?
We'll be reporting on that very shortly, but my concern is that, and we see this in government, in ministries, agencies, boards, and commissions, is that the explanation we get for not dealing with an issue is that, well, this is the system that operates. This is how we work. This is the model that we have in Ontario. And that's what led us to have problems with special needs children. That's what led us to have problems with the lottery system. That's what led us to have problems with MPAC, is that we become wedded to a system, a model, which is faulty. And in this case, I'll be reporting in more detail within the next month, but the Ministry of Training, Colleges, and Universities are wedded to an archaic model which puts in jeopardy the education of students who go to these colleges. And I think it's important for the government not to hide behind these models. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of the old General Motors having 8 brands, where they take a Chevy and add a little more chrome and fancy up the dash, and then they call it a Cadillac. If you look in hindsight, how could that have fooled the public for that long? And just wedded to a business case. And I see the ministries of government all too often fall in the same trap of saying, well, that's our model, this is our systems, without properly exercising discretion to fix problems as they arise.
You're suggesting insufficient oversight of some of these colleges?
Yes, I am.
So that's the essence of it. You suggest insufficient oversight, and as a result, some government money, whether federal or provincial, goes astray.
I'm saying that there's an insufficient oversight in how colleges operate in Ontario. We'll be reporting back in more detail within the next month, and the ministry has failed to acknowledge that there's a problem here. And I'm particularly concerned in view of the fact that there's $1 billion coming into the system, and the ministry is taking such a laissez-faire attitude towards that money.